All right, guys. We're starting on the 50-degree f77Es, which are the Gt40Ps. Notice the plug bars, right? Okay. Now, I took this job from a young drag racer who seems quite knowledgeable. He's actually running pretty darn quick with, I can't remember his entire combination. I have it written all down. We'll go over it in an upcoming video. But he wants to run pretty darn quick 8th mile with Ford iron heads. So him and I went over it, and this is what we came up with. I wanted to try nasty 50-degree seat because it's a drag racer. We can get away with a little bit bigger cam. Actually, probably a lot bigger cam, because the 50-degree really cuts back on your reversion, which is an important point of the equation. He got them washed, he got them milled, he got them set up for studs and guide plates. I sent them the specs for the cutters. It looks like the guy did a nice job. Okay, I mean, they look good. You can see there's 4 separate angles there. The narrow one is the 50. But okay, here. Let's take a look at the valve. Right? We got Ferrara 1.9s. That looks pretty decent. It's a wide seat, though. I mean, it looks much wider on the valve than it does here. Let's take a look at one that I lapped. Actually, I think I'm set up. Okay, this is the one I lapped. Okay, you can see it's awfully wide. I'm not really sure why it's so wide. But that's neither here or there. I mean, this is the stocker. We're going to go over the stock flows and stuff first. But, okay, you can see the way the pattern is on the valve. If we can get a focus on it, it looks pretty good. It's right about where it should be, right? A little bit wider than I'd like. And then you look at the exhaust, and you're going to say, all right, that looks good, Charlie. It's a little wide. But the problem is, that's a GM15. We spec these for 1.9 Ferraras, 1.6 Ferraras. Hold on a sec. Okay, that's what the 1.6 Ferraras look like. So at first I'm like, I see they checked the valves with, some magic marker on the valves and slapped them in and saw where they were sitting. But they didn't cut a 50 on the valve. They left it at a 45, which I think just gave them the wrong impression. And then I said, before I get upset, find an old GM valve, cut a 50 on it, lap it, see where we are. Okay, it looks like they're cut for 1.5s. Now, before you get crazy and upset, which I'm kind of over that, the 50 takes a lot more out of the wall. And before I get crazy, I'm like, you know what? Let's see how it develops with the crappy GM valve. I mean, I'm not worried about the Ferrara valve. I got 3 sets of heads I could use them in. I'll buy the customer a Ferrara 1.5. I know they make them. So, not the end of the world. And, I keep thinking about what my mom would say. My mom, 82 years old, half Sicilian, half German, tough as freaking nails, right? She'd say, things like that happen for a reason. And I think what the reason is we're going to be kind of pushing our luck on that inside edge. And we might be better off with the size that these were cut for. So I'm not really complaining at the moment. If I can get the flows that I need to out of this, and I'm pretty sure I can, we're going to be in better shape with the 1.5 than the original 1.6 plan. So let's see how we did on the 1.5. Now, The valve hasn't got a back cut on it yet, because once I cut them for a back cut, that's it. It's done. So we'll see how they develop, and if it's not strong enough in the middle, we'll back cut it. But we're going to see how they start, right? So this is completely stock ports. I mean, I'm not 100% thrilled. I mean, I like the big bronze guide, but I'm not thrilled about how they busted out, a couple of those guides. I'm always worried a crack could start. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do with them, but I'm definitely going to try to eliminate any stress risers so we don't get any cracking, starting at that thin part of the guide and then moving down. Okay, we probably need something to compare this to, so let's compare. Let me grab another sheet. We'll compare them to my Gt40Ps that have had a decent amount of work done to them. Okay, so this is the Gt40Ps, right? It's a 1.85 valve, which really measures 1.845 because I goofed it up a little bit when I ground it out. It's got a 35-degree back cut. It's got a 19.5 back cut behind that to take that lip out. This was right after I blew out that pinch. I blew out the pinch. It got a couple hit or miss gains. Okay, the pinch was not holding us back. So we're going to take these flows and compare them next to the 1.9 50-degree seat on completely stock ports. Now, since these have had a bunch of development work to them, I would expect these to be a lot better. So we're going to take a quick look, right? Minus, 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 all the way down. The best we did was 203, which is not terrible. These heads only flow 195, I think, stock. So it got to pick up by going to a little bit bigger valve and the 50-degree seat at top end, right? But it's pretty far off of my developed port. Okay, take a look at 300. You got 177.3, 151. You're still off by a decent amount. Okay. Let's see how we did on the developed Gt40p with a 1.46 valve, which is the stock valve size, versus our 1.5 old Chevy valve with no back cut, with a completely stock port but the 50-degree seat. All right, with plus, plus, minus, 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 all the way down. All right, so the developed port was actually pretty darn good. Remember, this is the port that I was impressed at how quiet it was. Like after 350, that port was super quiet. And I'm like, I'm dying to cut it for a bigger valve, but it kind of works the way it is. But when this customer came by and he said he wanted to do drag racing, I'm like, all right, we got to work on the exhaust a little more. Not that this wouldn't work on a drag racing port. It would. But you got to remember, right, the bigger valve, even if we only go with a 1.5 versus a 1.46, is introducing a lot more area quicker. So that changes the dynamics of the exhaust. Okay. From there, we're going to go to a roughed out port. And I mean roughed, meaning I hit a couple internal angles, and changed it up a little bit. That's all the angles that we're going to leave. We're going to leave one big cut before the 50, and that's going to be it. Everything else is going to get blended in. Now, this does not have a huge amount taken out of the chamber. What's nice about these is these cylinder walls. These port walls are nice and thick. You can take a decent amount of metal out of them, but you still have to be careful. There's a thin spot on this side of the wall, and there is a thin spot on this side of the wall. So you can't just blast them out. Okay, you gotta kind of inch up on it, and you gotta measure often. Okay, the exhaust, you can see I still got a little bit of that machined lip because it was pretty decent. I haven't brought my radius right out to the seat yet because I'm not 100% sure out what I'm going to do. But I took some metal off that wall, and this whole port got a quick rough out. Both ports got a quick rough out, and I did open the pinch up quite a bit. Here, this is a stock pinch. Stock pinch numbers are good for about 230 CFM, and I took some metal out of the pinch and brought it up to 247.8 CFM. I'm hoping to get these right around 250 CFM. I mean, if I did, and this is without a back cut, I got 240, but it's 700. I don't think he's going to run a 700 cam, but he might run a 600 cam. All right, 234. And if I do that without, let me take a quick look. Now I'm getting confused. I didn't write whether this has got a back cut or not, but the back cut would have more meat in the middle. I may have to look at a different flow sheet, but lose a little bit of peak, gain more in the mid-range, probably a better setup. Now this is going to be a 306. He's got two different intakes for it. He's got a Performer RPM and he's got a Victor Jr. Performer RPM only flows about 220. The RPM only flows about 240. So, in any case, I gave him a discount on the intake. He didn't go for it. So he's going to try them both, and then we'll see what happens. But I'd like to squeeze 250 out of these. Okay, forgive me if I went over this already. I'm already fried. It's already hot in here, and my brain is a little toasty. And it's been more than 2 hours since I ate. You know, got to eat every 2 hours. Got to keep the blood sugar just right. Okay, so we went no back cut, 1.9, 1.9, 50 degree, no back cut, just a roughed out port, and I opened the pinch up to 1.040. All right, minus, 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 which happens to be the way. Seems the way I port. Always lose some low lift. I'm not really worried about it, to be honest. Plus, 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 plus. Okay, we went. We'll take a look at 500. We went from 203 to 208.1. Only 5 CFM. Not a huge. Did not gain a huge amount. Now, you know, the port is not. I didn't take a huge amount of metal out of it. It's still quite rough. But you would think you would get more than 5 CFM out of it, right? Well, you don't. So, okay. Let's take a look at our exhaust. See if our exhaust did any better. Let me put the pluses and minuses in. Okay, you can see on our exhausts, we're comparing this one to this one. They're both the same 1.5 GM valve. Minus, plus, 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 all the way down. And we're running at, let's say, 500, 160. Compare that to our developed 1.46, 162. All right, 174 with a small pipe. 176 with a big pipe. 186.3 with a small pipe. 185. We are already in the higher lifts, beating a very well-developed port. And this one was nice and quiet as well. So there's some good info, right? If you do the port the right way, what's the right way? I raised the roof a little bit. I took some of the garbage out of it. I opened both walls a little bit. Let me flip this over and I can show you where I took it out. Okay. You can take some out of this wall. The walls are relatively thick when you first start. But as soon as you start developing a nice shape, they get thin quick. So, right in the center of this wall, on this side, has got a thin spot that'll develop once you start getting going, right? Took a little bit off of that boss, not a tremendous amount. Took a good amount of metal off of this wall. Looks like we got an inclusion there. These castings do have several inclusions. If you don't know what an inclusion is, it's just like an inclusion on a diamond. right? You can have a beautifully clear diamond, and there's a chunk of black coal in the middle of it. Well, an inclusion on a cylinder head is the same type of thing, right? You'll have a chunk of sand or dirt or something, usually a chunk of sand from one of the molds. This is a big one in one of the intake ports, so it's going to be gone. I'm not really worried about it. The inclusion is bad because it causes a weak spot. You can get a crack there, or I had a set of Oldsmobile 400s. Gorgeous car. It was one of them, I think it was a convertible Buick GS or something. And it was, I think, a 69 400, which is a smaller bore, longer stroke. And I was doing the heads up for it. Actually, I built the whole engine for it for the guy. And I did some calculation work. I found out we could squeeze in 455 valves, even though it's a tight chamber. Everything would work. And when I go to, I started to do it. Of course, they're original, matching numbers, heads, blah, blah, blah. Literally, the wall between the intake port and the exhaust port had an inclusion in it and fell apart. Literally fell apart. So I tried to weld them with my nickel rod, heating up the heads, blah, blah. It's a freaking mess, welding iron, right? No luck. I said to the guy, listen, I don't think I could save this head. He's like, you have to save that head. It's numbers matching. End of story. My brother was running a welding shop at the time, so he was actually teaching welding. So I go in at lunchtime, and I'm like, I have to, literally invent a different way to do this. So I took my iron rod, and I think I pounded it thin, and I took the TIG machine, and I heated up the head, and I TIGged it and added the iron rod as a filler, and built that all back up and was able to machine it out. And I left it a little bit thick. There's no question. There's a little bit less airflow on the port, on the intake port and that exhaust port. And it's got a nice thick divider wall because it was a terror to weld. But a couple of years later, he did send me a video of it running, and it sounded sweet. So, give you an idea of how much trouble an inclusion can cause, right? All right, well, so far so good. They're not where I want them, but I think a little more development work, and we're going to get these are going to get it done. All right, guys.